Hey there, Bruce, and welcome back to Deluge, Sermon for the Dead. In the last episode, we got suckered into going to the Easter break thing, so I guess that's what's happening this time. We shall see anyway. That evening, I sat in my room, staring at the stacks of unopened textbooks. Although, Ina also got suckered into it, so I guess that's good. With all the extra work Ina piled upon me, I reckon there would be little time to get around to any real studying, especially now that she signed me up for a 4-day trip I hadn't planned for. Yeah, why had she signed me up for that trip? I took out my phone. Abe, what's the matter? Why'd you sign me up for the Easter break? I thought you hated these kind of outings. An awkward guffaw resounded through the telephone. I did, sure, but I changed my mind. Do you know what I was thinking? I was thinking a trip like this is a godsend. You'll be able to observe Marissa day and night for 4 days straight. You'll be able to get close and intimate. Truly get inside her mind. I sighed. At least we're in this together. Yeah, thanks for that. Anyway, if that's all I have to go, I have editing to do. Ina hung up the phone. As always, ulterior motives were at play. Ina expected me to mobilise my budding friendship with Marissa as a means to generate more headlines for her ailing newspaper. It's ailing, is it? And although I resigned myself to the prospect of going on the Easter trip, I resolved not to let things get out of hand. Determined to spend the rest of the evening in a productive manner, I was in the process of opening my trigonometry textbook when the phone began to hum. When I picked up the call, Vrika's voice rang out, tinnily. Abe, there have been many developments. I looked up that guy, Peter Van Helsing. He teaches a lecture on Thursday afternoons, so I called the university explaining that we're high school students interested in pursuing cultural anthropology next year. They told me to come to his lecture next Thursday and that he'd talk to us afterwards. A meeting with a real professor, isn't that great? Save. What time do we leave? Rika let out an appreciative moan. At 3, after our last class has ended. She's not going to let us not go. Also, I'm very excited that you'll be joining us on Easter break. We were in a bit of a pinch, as most senior students have come to regard the Easter break outing as a waste of time, but in reality the trip is a great way to relax before finals, whilst also providing a chance to reiterate over the important parts of the curriculum. We'll be staying at a rustic village of Rybury, which lies on the lakeside. I detected an uncharacteristic excitement in her voice. My family owns an inn over there, which we're able to charter at a very good rate. Anyway, we're leaving on Monday afternoon. Please don't be late. She terminated the call. And the room was filled with nothing else but the drone of our neighbour's extractor fan. Unopened textbooks stared at me. Defeated, I crawled into bed. Shit, I know that all too well. That's way too familiar. On Thursday afternoon, I encountered Rika sitting outside my last class, blocking off all possible escape routes. We made our way toward the station, and though I had been anticipating the trip to Bremersburg with mild reluctance, I had to admit the gentle spring breeze and the omnipresent signals of nature awaking stirred a certain fancy in me. We arrived at the station just in time for the 3 o'clock train. Thank you for coming on this trip with me. I would have gone alone, it's just that I've been so busy lately. With finals and swimming practice. And to make things worse, my father has asked me to help him canvass for his re-election campaign. I detest the work, but I can't refuse him. Abbotsford is only a short train ride away from the city, and it was within 15 minutes that we approached the first suburbs. Gradually the train slowed down before coming to a cautious stop. Bremersburg, what a godforsaken place. Built after the reclamation of the Marschpolder, it aspires to be a hallmark of post-war architecture, but in all its craftsmanship, it lacks culture. It lacks character. The citizens here are strangers to one another, unlike in our little town. That's how cities are. I smiled. Maybe that's not so bad? It is. If everyone is anonymous, there's no accountability. Places like these breed evil. When we arrived at the Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor Helsing's lecture was still in progress. We waited outside of the auditorium until he was finished and all the students had filed out. A short, dark-haired man welcomed us. You must be the students that contacted me. Rika? The professor extended his hand, which she accepted gracefully. Peter Helsing, pleased to meet you. I'm delighted to see young people take an interest in the science of anthropology, and so proactive too to reach out to me like this. You don't see that very often these days. But it's the way to go, in the social sciences I mean. You need to get ahead, know the right people. Let out a dry cough. Please tell me about yourselves. My name, as you know, is Rika Kuiper, and this is Abe. We're in our last year of high school, and although it's still a month until finals, I'm sure they'll prove to be no more than a formality. She shot me a cunning grin. Personally, the reason I contacted you is that I'm seeking direction. I'm quite sure I want to major in anthropology, but what type? Cultural, linguistic, forensic? In a thinly veiled attempt at feigning youthful enthusiasm, her voice was rising steadily. And then the next question arises, where do I go? I mean, Bremersburg is nearby, but there are much better universities. Leiden, maybe even Oxbridge. Peter placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, you're doing great. You can only make one decision at a time. Personally, I would advise against Bremersburg, as they don't even have a dedicated anthropology department down here. That's why they asked me to make the commute from Leiden once a week. But there's no need to come to a hasty decision. Rika let out a sigh of relief. I'm sorry. It's such an ambivalent time for me. I feel like all my steps are magnified, as though they could set loose an unstoppable chain reaction. But I apologize for wasting your precious time. Please tell us about your renowned anthropology department. I will. But the next class should be starting here in a short while. Let's continue our conversation in the exposition area. We followed Peter into an adjacent building where glass cabinets displayed a multitude of zoological exhibits. Let me tell you a little about my field. Anthropology is the study of humans, but what you encounter at times has few traces of humanity left inside. Anthropologists delve into the dark depths of our past, the violent, trauma-ridden tearing away from our previous existence as animals, and the turbulent process of becoming human. When I visited the rainforests of West Papua a year ago, I was away from civilization for months. I watched as a man skinned a boar with his bare hands, and then I helped him remove its entrails and clean the blood and feces from its flesh. The professor revelled at the sight of my disgusted face, as though he were enjoying the lurid details he threw our way. Anthropology is great, but it isn't for the faint of heart, especially when you take it seriously. At our department, we do science the old-fashioned way. We try to disengage from the petty trends that have come to dominate our field over the past decades, the wholesome fairy tales of universal brotherhood and noble savages that naive students are attracted to like flies. You leered at Rika, who shrugged coolly. How about Bram Bulwer? Was he old-fashioned? The professor stirred at the sound of his name. Bram Bulwer? You appear to have read up on the history of our department. Bram should be regarded as a pioneer in our field. He didn't shy away from anything. Even when he probably should have. But why do you bring up his name? Rika took a deep breath. I found something in a book of his, and I was wondering if you could clarify. She took out a stack of paperwork from her bag, some of which she had marked with page markers. Please look at these. On this page of his notebook, he writes something about 3 Abbott skulls, and I'm curious what he was referring to. But I can't find anything more about them. Peter looked at her, appearing genuinely confused. I have no idea what that could be. But then his eyes narrowed. This is such a particular inquiry, it makes me wonder why you'd ask. Are you by any chance from Abbotsford? Rika remained silent for a moment and then she nodded. I thought so. We've received inquiries about these skulls before from a church. Did they put you up to this? Rika shook her head violently. No, not at all. We're truly curious. The professor sighed. Look, I'm telling the truth when I say I have no idea what Bram was referring to in these notebooks. But considering the sustained interest from your community... Rika's lips curled into a precocious smile. I am willing to do a quick search in the archives. Next week or whenever you find a PhD student who I can delegate this task to. He sighed. But after this, you'll really need to let the issue rest. I understand how an aside like this can spark interest in an affected community, but most likely it's nothing. A typographical error or a wild idea. Rika nodded understandingly, though I saw a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. I hope you kids do decide to study at my department, especially after the trouble you put me through. It'll be a huge change of environment for you, after growing up in such a rural community. I never grew up and... He cut me off. College is a time to expand your mind, to question the assumptions instilled in you during your upbringing. I'll contact you as soon as I receive more information. Well, he kind of changed his tone there pretty quickly. Well, that went well. Rika was beaming. You think so? He didn't seem too happy with the ruse we came up with. No, he didn't. Oh, sure he didn't, but that was just a way to get a foot in the door. Matters like these require a personal touch. A dull letter from an orthodox congregation is easily cast aside, but as soon as you give your inquiry a youthful, pretty face, it becomes a lot harder for a man like Peter to say no. She flashed me a meaningful grin. I didn't really notice him looking at you in that way. Oh, but he was looking. At you. Rika burst out in contagious laughter that persisted all the way to the station. Afternoon rush hour had commenced, and the city was tense with the bustle of cars. Monday morning. I lay for a second in blissful ignorance, until the reality of my situation intruded on me. After forcing myself out of bed, I climbed down the stairs to open the door. Good morning, Abe. Naomi? To what do I owe the honour? Rika and I are both out and about gathering the late sleepers. She's picking up May at this very moment. You wouldn't want to miss the train, would you? Although I'd been aware that Easter break was rapidly approaching, early morning amnesia seemed to have erased it entirely from my mind. I hope you're packed and ready. Come on, let's head for the station. I retrieved my bag and followed her through the empty streets. While we walked, I could feel an undeniable tension in the air. After a while, Naomi broke the silence. The weather forecast for the coming days has been good. Even though the water may be cold, we can expect all-round pleasant temperatures. Her vague attempts at small talk felt unsettling to me. I muttered a wry response. Abe? I've been meaning to ask you something. Her voice sounded brittle, as though she were mustering up great courage just to talk to me. It's about Out of nowhere, a looming figure pushed itself into my field of sight. Startled by the sudden interruption, Naomi swallowed her words. Abe, old boy, great to see you tagging along. Bernard, are you coming on Easter break? He is. He was one of the last people to sign up. I guess Rika managed to coerce you. There was no coercion required. I'm due for an outing, you see. It's important to distract your mind every once in a while. Water, sky, female companionship. Isn't that what life is all about? Naomi leered at him. When we arrived at the station square, a small committee stood waiting on us. What is he doing here? Him? Oh, he seemed interested in joining us. Oh, we were still short of participants. Madeline, as soon as I heard you were coming, I knew I couldn't be left out. I looked at Marissa without saying anything. Rika, you really shouldn't have done that. Bernard is trouble. You're so annoying, Bernard. And it looks like you've been harassing poor Abe again. Well, I'm not associating with you during any part of this trip. She shrugged haughtily. Please keep your distance from me. May showed up after 15 minutes, even Ina appeared, carrying 2 suitcases. She looked as sullen as ever. I brought my laptop and books. That inn better have good security. Rika stifled a laugh. Oh, Ina, I'm glad you agreed to come. We need someone to make sure we get around to studying. Collectively, we made our way to the platform. The train shot past miles and miles of farmland. Here and there, acres of green were interspersed with brightly coloured tulip fields, imparting seasonal variety upon the otherwise monotonous train road. The flowers are pretty, aren't they? They always cheer me up when spring comes around. Are you looking forward to the trip? I love visiting new places. The people, the culture. Rybury is only a 30-minute train ride away, you know. Incredible, isn't it? After exiting the train at Rybury Station, we made our way through the narrow streets that led to the inn, a townhouse-style building that counted 3 floors. A soothing breeze originating from the giant lake could be felt throughout the town. When we arrived at the inn, Rika let us in swiftly. Dear travel companions, my family has been gracious enough to make this property available to our students year after year. Let us ensure that we continue this tradition by acting as responsible stewards and leaving this place even cleaner than we encountered it. But most importantly, please make yourselves at home and enjoy the fellowship together. You're free to share in all the amenities the inn has to offer, even though they may be sparse. Thank you for attending Abbotsford's High's 7th annual Easter break. Let's study hard and be joyful. I carried my luggage up the stairs before helping Ina, who was clearly struggling, and then I swung open the door to the master bedroom. Just in time to witness a spectacle unfold. Get out, Bernard. I'm not sharing my room with you, let alone a double bed. Madeline, you're so cold. I may as well just sleep with the cellar rats. Oh, Abe, it's good that you came. What do you have to say about all of this? I mean, he should leave, right? Bernard, don't be a nuisance. Let her have the room. There, Bernard. Now it's 2 against 1. You should be ashamed to intrude upon a lady's private chambers. Attracted by the noise, Lorika stuck her head around the corner. Oh, you two. Marissa, come with me. We can share the penthouse suite. Abe, maybe you should room here with Bernard. Then Ina can take the family room together with... What? I was thinking Abe and I could share a room in case we need to work on the newspaper business. Ina was blushing visibly, and I noticed Lorika's lip arched into a mischievous smile. Oh, Ina, there'll be more than enough opportunity for that. It's just that we can't allow mixed dormitories. My family wouldn't approve of that at all. It's not even like... Her voice trailed off. We carried Ina's luggage up to the family room, where she immediately began to unpack. Now, Abe, you may think that we're here on some kind of vacation, but I don't want to let this trip go to waste. We kicked off the campaign season with some light interviews to bring out the human factor behind each party. Now, however, is the time to start digging deeper. If you get the chance, please ask Marissa about her political strategy. I'll do the same for Rika to find out what she knows about her father's campaign. She paused. But there's more that I want you to look into. Remember what Marissa said about the scandal she claimed to have uncovered? I want you to hear her out about this. It should be in... Just then Naomi knocked on the door. Ina became deathly silent. I excused myself. When I returned to the master bedroom, I found Bernard combing his hair in the mirror. Well, Abe, seems like the morality police has condemned us to one another. And personally, I don't mind. This may even provide an opportunity for us to grow closer. I reckon this is your first time, he grinned, sharing a bed with another man. I shot backward. Oh, I see parochial fear growing in your eyes, but I can assure you there is nothing to be shy about. Once you go to college, you realize just how much joy there is in fraternizing with your fellow brethren. Life is a symposium, my friend. Love is all around. I am not sitting in this room playing soggy biscuit with Bernard. I wish to go somewhere else. Let's go out and be bohemian. After lunch, we headed up to the beach. Rybury lies on a tideless lake, large enough to hide the opposite banks from view. I figure this is what it all comes down to. The beach. If that's what you can call it. Anyway, I brought my books. You can go ahead and splash around in the water. I'm getting cold just looking at it. Ina rolled out her bath towel. Naomi, who'd been observing the scene, approached us. I think I'm going in for a swim. I need to stay in shape for the championships this summer. Carefully, she removed her glasses, passed them to Ina for safekeeping. Not wearing her school uniform, Naomi appeared unnaturally pale under the clouded afternoon sky. Please don't stare at me. I should have brought my sports swimsuit. This is very uncomfortable. I continued down the waterline to where Rika stood, looking out into the distance. Can you see how dark the waters are? At some points the lake is very deep. When this used to be a sea, tidal currents would tear long rifts along the former shoreline. Rika really loves the sea, maybe a little too much at times. But I don't mind them turning it into a lake. The water is much calmer that way. Rika, are you going to try and swim up to the Humming Stone? I looked into the distance where the small black spot shimmered at the horizon. The Humming Stone was an underwater rock feature that reached right up to water level, so that it was visible whenever a wave opened up the water's surface. The rock had always been a hazard for passing ships, as they could easily rupture their hulls on its unseen edges, and Rika told me many tales existed about the Humming Stone, featuring all kinds of hideously deformed creatures that lived there and feasted upon the flesh of drowned sailors. Not much later, Marissa approached me. Hey Abe, I hadn't found much chance to thank you yet. Thank me for what? For your feature piece on Flock last week. The interview came out beautifully. Oh, it's nothing. Thank you for your cooperation. I'm serious, it was such a beautiful article, and so honest. I must admit, I was having second thoughts before it came out. Our movement is used to being treated unfairly by the media due to prejudices that people have. But I wanted to trust you, Abe, because you were so kind to me. You kept your promise and treated us fairly. A fierce determinism had formed in her eyes. That's all we ask for, to be treated fairly. If only the press would report the facts. Did you hear our piece was picked up by the Evening Mirror? Yes, it's fabulous. I've been receiving phone calls from across the low countries. Who would ever think that the concerns of a little town would gain national interest? Then she sighed. I have to be careful, though. Lecherous journalists have been making comments on my appearance. The fact is, I did some modelling work while I was in university. And now the press has dug up photographs. I need to tread carefully. Although this kind of coverage can spark interest in our movement, it distracts from our core message. As I said, we are seldom treated fairly. I want to be a serious politician. Ulrika, who was standing nearby, turned her head. Oh, but you are a serious politician, Marissa. I read your interview. It was great. My father is very excited about you. He's looking forward to working as your colleague. Your father? Councilman Kuiper said that. He did. He thinks you'll be a serious competitor in the race, that AIR will have heavy task maintaining its majority position. But he agrees that many of the ideas expressed in your interview about creeping corruption and the gradual erosion of moral values in our town. Maybe this year we'll see a transformation in which things change for the better, where our community wins in the long run, and not just one political party. As overseers of his creation, we must be above reproach. That's right, isn't it? Oh, Ulrika, you put things into words so nicely. Have you ever considered a career in politics? When evening fell, we gorged ourselves on seafood from the local cafeteria before heading back to the inn. We'll have our first study session at 8. Feel free to retreat to your rooms until then. There we are, Abe. This must be the life the gods had envisioned for us. Lounging in the sun during the day, contemplating the classics at night. Does that mean you'll be joining our study session? Oh, not at all. That's for you high schoolers. Personally, I've done enough studying for a lifetime. He was staggering, like a weary soldier. So, Bernard, what are you going to do now that you're out of university? Are you going to look for a job? I'm not sure. I want to live an easy life filled with art and beauty. I've always aspired to be a playwright, you see, although I'm afraid there aren't many openings in that field. I've done some amateur productions in college. I loved that. Especially the auditions for the female parts. You have some of your father in you. He snapped back fiercely. Shut your mouth. Don't say these things. That man wouldn't recognise beauty if it spat him in the face. He corrupts all that he touches. Poor Madeline. I heard she used to be a model. His eyes lit up. She was. I tried to get her to play the lead part in a production of Salome one time, but naturally she turned up her nose. But I've collected her entire catalogue. I even went out to buy an issue of Lighthouse when she was featured in there. I'll show you when we get home. I nodded affirmatively. Ulrika called for us to gather in the common room downstairs. Oh, it's a nice room. This evening will be dedicated to study. Senior students, let's look over the examination syllabus together. If we're not in our final year, can we go out to the beach to explore? Of course not. That would defy the spirit of the trip. May, you can go over your regular homework for now. I can't imagine you aren't behind somewhere. May pouted self-consciously. And Marissa, Bernard, please think of something to do. Marissa, you probably have some council matters to attend to. Marissa held up her laptop. I'm at it already. And Bernard, you do whatever it is you do. I'll just shut up and read Nabokov. Grumbling, he sat himself down in a corner. Ulrika, Naomi, and Ina and I began working through our biology reader. It wasn't long before I realised that I was so dramatically behind that there was little point in asking questions. Ina sat staring into empty space, similarly lost, even though I'd always pictured her to be a decent student. Soon May came over to our table. Ina, please help me with this. I can't find the hypotenuse. May, I've explained this to you before. Everyone appeared to welcome the distraction. Ulrika, I was wondering, if the land around Abbotsford forms an artificial island, then How come some of the houses in Rybury look so old? Rika glanced up from her syllabus. The marsh polder was reclaimed in 1942. Back then, a large stretch of sea around the Isle of Abbott was dammed off before being pumped dry and connected to the mainland. Rybury is one of the oldest communities on the newly formed land. The houses here were built in the 40s, thus containing salient traits of pre-war architecture. Soon after its founding, some of the fishing families from Abbott settled here in an attempt to revive their old trade. While the lake was filled with brackish water, they were still able to fish for herring and haddock. But once the water grew sweet, they had to venture out through the giant floodgates up north to fish in the Northern Sea. You should understand that the reclamation of the marsh polder left a huge impression on the inhabitants of the Isle of Abbott. Gradually, they witnessed the surrounding waters sink down until only a vast wasteland of mud remained. Their idyllic island life was brutally torn away from them, and these scars run deep in our community. But besides all the sorrow, the reclamation had some interesting side effects. Although the newly drained seabed was untraversable at first, soon archaeologists descended upon Abbotsford to see what they could dig up from the mud. And although the island community, still traumatised from the dramatic change in lifestyle, was uncharacteristically unwelcoming of their sudden arrival, the archaeologists proceeded to erect barracks and set to work. By now, all present had put down their books and sat listening to Rika's story. So what did the archaeologists find? Rika got up from the table. All this talking has made me thirsty. Let's see if they've left us anything to drink. She walked behind the bar, where a small refrigerator stood. We have tonic, ginger ale, chocolate milk. After Rika returned with refreshments, she resumed talking. Anyway, Marissa, to answer your question, the archaeologists mainly found bones. The first place where they started digging was around the old graveyard. And as I told you, Abe, she nodded at me, they unearthed a number of old gravestones that had eroded off from the island and lodged themselves in the former seabed. And along with the gravestones, naturally, they found the remains of the deceased, which they immediately returned to the community to be buried underneath the new church. Then, after the graveyard was done, they expanded their search. In the exposed seabed, the archaeologists found remains of concentric embankments running around the island that had been swept away in the past by rising waters. Abbott used to be quite large, but ever since the late Middle Ages, the island slowly lost land to the encroaching sea. The archaeologists even found the foundations of stone huts that had once been submerged completely. Rika took a sip from her glass, which contained a clear liquid. But for the most part, they found bones. Boring old bones. What a terrible time these archaeologists must have had digging fruitlessly in the mud. But you must all be getting very tired. I suggest we break up this meeting, in order for us to get some well-deserved sleep. I could hear Bernard stir in his chair. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Just bones, you say? Aren't you leaving out an interesting detail? What are you referring to? Rika's tone had become dismissive. If I'm not mistaken, I recall there was a certain implement. I'm too tired to play guessing games. Let's all go up to our rooms. Let me refresh your memory. There was a curious artifact that archaeologists found near the island. They keep it in a display case at the university. What? I believe they call it the alien implement. Oh, that's a well-known hoax. It was a hammer of sorts. And it wasn't real. The alien implement has been conclusively proven to be planted by one of the researchers as a prank. Well, if it really was a hoax, then what a hoax it was. One downcast afternoon, an archaeologist dug up a tool, no more than 12 inches long, shaped like an asymmetrical double-faced hammer. It was completely unique to the area and forged from a heavy dark steel. One of its faces was blunt like an ordinary hammer, but the other narrowed into a sharp reinforced point, as though it were used to kill animals with one blow to the head. And the implement was crafted in a way that was wholly unknown to these regions. At first glance, its surface displayed a scaling of miniature steel shields, overlapping each other to form thin steel plating. But upon further inspection, this plating appeared to continue beyond the surface, in layers that descended all the way to its core, and the scales interlocked in such a precise way that they contracted upon touch, forming an almost flesh-like grip, without sacrificing any of the tensile strength of the tool. And the most curious thing about this item was that it seemed impervious to oxidation. After all these centuries, that it must have spent lying in the ocean floor, it was without even a speck of rust. Rika coughed. How scary, Bernard. Isn't it great to share lurid horror tales among friends? But please don't overdo it. We wouldn't want to give May nightmares. I hear Marissa clearing her throat. Bernard enjoys telling tall tales. The thing is, he never knows when to stop. Come on, everyone. Let's go to bed. We still have 3 more days before us. And with that, we're going to wrap this episode up here because we're out of time for today. That's the perfect stopping point, isn't it, really? And in the next episode, we will continue our Easter break. How exciting. See you then. Thanks for watching, Bruce.